This is my Epipremnum Pinnatum Asian form, also called a Fantasia. This plant is ticking me off in 3 very specific ways. The first problem is it's reached the top of its moss pole. I need to extend it. The second problem is this is a pole that I made without a plastic sheet back, and because of that it dries out very quickly. And the third problem is this pole is filled with only sphagnum moss. This moss pole is becoming a bit of a headache for me, so I need to fix these 3 things. So what I'm going to be doing today is extending that moss pole, making this pole a plastic sheet back one, and changing the substrate that's inside the pole to a tree fern fiber sphagnum moss combination. The first thing that I'm going to do is get this plant out of this pot, and it's living in Leca, so just giving it a gentle squeeze. It's really packed in there. Those are some of the roots at the bottom, so I'm just going to have to really give that a good squeeze to get that plant out. Okay, the plant is now out of that. The next thing I'm going to do is take off the metal rod or the garden stake that's attached to this pole. So just clipping off those cable ties, and that should bring it up nicely. That's that pole off. I need to clip off some of this wire mesh in order to create room where I'm going to put my plastic sheet back. I'm going to use the same wire mesh that's at the front of this pole. I'm just going to get rid of the one that's at the back. Okay. I'll just very gently turn this around and clip off the wire mesh on the other side. So I've just got wire mesh at the front of the plant. Now I'm just sort of eyeballing what would make a good size wire mesh at the front. So yeah, this is not an exact science. So some of the roots are entangled within the wire mesh, so I'll just cut around them and release that mesh from those roots. That's a sheet of wire mesh from the back of the pole. That is what that now looks like. And I can actually take off some of this sphagnum moss that is not been infiltrated by the area roots and put that to the side. So I'm just taking off some of that sphagnum moss. That moss is absolutely fine, absolutely nothing wrong with it at all. As I go further down, you can see that's a bit more difficult to remove because those area roots have woven through that sphagnum moss, but I'm just very gently tugging at that to take that off. And oh, the one right at the bottom is a lot harder to get off. I'm keeping this sphagnum moss because I'm going to reuse it to pack this pole again. This is the plastic sheet that I'm going to use to cover the back of the pole. I cut this one up earlier, and I'm just picking this up and assessing whether I need to cut that wire mesh a bit more. I think I do, because I'm not going to have that lovely D shape that I'm looking for. That wire mesh is still a little bit too wide. So I just see where my plant is inserting, which side would be the easier to cut off. And I think this side is easier to cut off because I've got more plant closer to this end of the wire mesh. So I'm going to come this way and let's see if I cut. The wire mesh that I've got, it's 8 boxes wide. Okay, that is looking pretty good. So I now need to prepare my substrate. I'm going to reuse the sphagnum moss that I took out of this pole, and I'm going to add tree fern fiber. So I'm just mixing my tree fern fiber and my sphagnum moss in together. This is foliage focus in my watering can. I put some of that in there to make sure that the substrate is nice and moist before I put it into my pole. That is what my substrate now looks like. I'm very, very happy with that. The sphagnum moss is very much mixed in with that tree fern fiber, and this will be fantastic in my pole. Very gently put my pole down and attach one side of the plastic sheet to the metal mesh. And of course, we're going to use my trusty cable ties for that. So I'm starting right at the bottom where I know that my pole is going to meet the nursery pot. One side of the plastic sheet is now attached to the wire mesh, but before I start filling up the pole, I'm going to make sure I put my cable ties inside there, and I'm going to use these cable ties to attach this pole to my metal rod or my garden stake. And because I'm attaching a relatively thicker pole, I'm going to use longer cable ties for this process. So making sure the heads of the cable tie are on the outside of the pole. Okie dokie, I am now going to fill my pole with my substrate. So not really packing that in there, just making sure I've got enough to have a lovely thickness to my pole. Okay, just give that a little test. I'm happy with how that's looking. I'm now going to close off that side of the pole with my cable ties. Okay, that is my plant attached to my new pole. I'm now just going to cut off all these bits of cable tie that I don't need. I need to make sure that my substrate is not falling out of the bottom end of my pole. So I'm just going to pin that wire mesh to that plastic sheet back so that creates a barrier. And of course, to do that, I am going to use my cable ties. So I've put my cable tie in through, that's better. Then I just close that off. And that makes my substrate secure. I do the same in the other hole. That is my plant on its new pole. I'm very, very, very happy with this. I think it's gone very, very well. I'm going to take this to the bathroom and just give those roots a wash, because you can see that there's some roots that have sloughed off that are a bit dead. I'm going to wash off those roots to make sure that my plant is absolutely clean before I repot it. I've washed my roots. They are looking absolutely beautiful. So that's what I'm going to be working with. So the next stage in this process is I'm actually going to extend my pole. This pole has a piece of wire mesh that is extending beyond the plastic sheet. And I can't cut that because there's some area roots that are already grown into that. So I need to attach another piece of plastic sheet onto here and extend the wire mesh from there. So I've got another piece of wire mesh, which is also 8 little boxes wide. And I've got another plastic sheet that I'm now going to attach to this metal mesh. This is a plastic sheet that I made earlier. I'm going to attach one side of it to this piece of wire mesh. Okay, so that's going to be like that. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. I think that is as far as I can go with that. I am now going to get my piece of wire mesh and continue to attach this to the plastic sheet there so that I've got my wire. I'm probably going to overlap it actually, just to reinforce that attachment. So I'm attaching this wire mesh to this wire mesh with a piece of cable tie. Oh, in you go. Okay. And I'll have the head of the cable tie inside the wire mesh so it doesn't actually damage the leaves on the outside. Okay, just cut off those bits. And now I can continue attaching the plastic sheet to the new piece of wire mesh. Okay, that's where my plastic sheet ends. And of course, I've got a redundant piece of wire mesh there. I'm just going to cut off the bit that I don't need. Remembering to put the cable ties in the holes in the middle, that's going to secure our metal rod, that's the word I'm looking for, or a garden stake. It's also called a garden stake. So away we go. Okay, that is my new pole. I'm just gonna fill that up with my leftover substrate. Making sure I pack the substrate into the top of the one that we did before, because obviously there's going to be a gap between the two poles, so I don't want that to be a dead space. And like before, close that off and attach cable ties to secure it. That looks fantastic. I'm very, very happy with that. I'll just cut off the bits of cable tie that I don't need. I am really hoping I don't damage my leaves with this process. I will be so angry with myself if I do. Now I have my garden stake. My garden stake is 1.5 meters high, and I am going to attach the garden stake to this pole. And I'm not going to attach it very securely. It's just acting as a placeholder for now, just to keep it in place. And I'll tighten that up a little bit later. Okay, that feels very, very firm with that garden stake at the back. It really anchors that pole together and it's really firm. So I'm just gonna clean this up and we'll get to the next stage. I'm gonna pot this plant up in a 14 centimeter pot. There's really no need to go bigger. The roots are not very big and I don't anticipate that it's going to get root bound anytime soon. So this size pot is just perfect. I want to make this a self-watering system with an indicator. So I've got a ceramic pot here, I've got a riser there, I've got my indicator, and I'm gonna put this in my nursery pot and that'll tell me when my reservoir is full. If you'd like more details about how I make this setup, just click on the link above and it'll take you to the video where I show you how I actually put all this together. I just opened the bottom of that indicator and put it through one of my holes there, and that secures it there. I've got my microfiber string there. I'll just push this through my pot, and that's what's going to help this pot actually become self-watering. It will wick up my nutrient solution through this string into my leca, or if you're using soil, it would work the same way. So that's what my device looks like. Now is where the fun stuff begins. This is where I would have really needed an assistant. My pot actually has two holes. This is another hole that I've created here because I'm going to put that metal rod that I've attached to my pole through this hole so it can go and stand up in my pot. Let's see how that is going to work. All right, so that is pretty much how I want that to work, like that. My roots go there and my self-watering device goes there. Yeah, I think this might work, ladies and gentlemen. It might just work. I'm gonna put a little bit of leca into there because I want some leca to go into the bottom. So, never done this before, so I have no idea how this is going to play out. This is not going good. Oh my goodness. Okay, all my leca's falling out, okay? This is not going well. I probably need to stand this up now. Okay, so if I do, hang on. If I do that, I don't know. Yeah. Where's the indicator? There. Yes. This is exactly how I want it to be. I want my pole to be flush with the top of the pot. So there. So the first thing I'm going to do now, let me just make sure that's right. It is a bit heavy. Lift it up a bit. I'll just secure these cable ties to make sure that my pole doesn't move. This is really hard to do by myself. But there we go. No, thank you. I don't need help. Not from you. That's my 6-year-old asking me if I need help. I do not need help from her because I don't need her on camera. There we go. I think that's good. That's good. I'm happy with that. I am very happy with this. Okay, so now I'm going to fill this pot up with Leca. Okay. I'm happy with the back. Now I'm just going to fill the Leca at the front. That is my plant there. I'm really happy with that actually. Yeah, that's looking really, really good. Oops, that hit the ceiling. I've got my water level indicator there, so it's right at the front. I can see it, which is fantastic. It's not my best work, but this is the first time I'm doing something like this. I'll probably do things a little bit differently next time, but I think this has actually gone really, really well. Now, the big test is how am I going to put this in there and how's that going to work out? Let's see. Okay, that's there. And I push my water level indicator right to the bottom, and that's there. Ooh. I might need to fiddle with this pole a little bit to get it a bit more stable. Look at that. How fantastic is that? Whew! Man. I did not think that was gonna work. So now is the moment of truth. I'm gonna fill up that reservoir. This video has not been about teaching you how to make a plastic sheet back moss pole. It's really been about showing you how you can actually go and reverse engineer a pole that you've made before to make it into one that you want it to be. So thank you very much for watching. Go and watch this video where I show you how to actually make one of these babies from scratch. I'll see you there.